Welcome to Policy and Governance Perspectives, the official podcast of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Join Dr. David Ramadan and Schar School experts as they engage in thought-provoking conversations with elected officials, policymakers, and thought leaders. Listen for in-depth discussions on policies, politics, governance, and career pathways, all designed to elevate your perspectives and expand your mind.
Welcome to another episode of Policy and Governance Perspective, the official podcast of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. I'm your host, David Ramadan. Fairfax County is one of the most important economic engines in the Commonwealth, home to George Mason University, Fortune 500 companies, federal contractors, startups, and some of the most diverse and dynamic communities in the country. But it's also a county facing real challenges: economic pressures from federal cutbacks, the ripple effects of the recent shutdown, and a housing market that's pushing workers and young professionals further out. Today, we're taking a closer look at all of it. I'm joined by a dear friend, Chairman Jeff McKay, who leads the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and has been the center of every major decision affecting the county's economy, its growth, and its future. And co-hosting with me is Theo Stamatis, a Master of Public Policy student here at the Schar School and an at-large commissioner on Fairfax County Small Business Commission. Together, we'll break down where Fairfax stands right now, how the shutdown and federal workforce cuts have impacted families and businesses, and what needs to happen next to keep this county competitive, affordable, and positioned for long-term success. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramadan.
Thank you. Chairman McKay, there's so much that we can cover with, but let's start with the macro. Give us a quick look. Jobs, revenues, where Fairfax is strongest, or where you're most exposed today.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a mixed bag, as your intro indicated. We feel really good about where we are in Fairfax County in a lot of measures, but we have some very real concerns about things that I would consider to be outside pressure points. You mentioned the instability in Washington, D.C., obviously something we're watching closely. But I have to say, when I look back at the last 3 years in terms of jobs, one real bright spot is that half of the jobs that have been created in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia were created just in Fairfax County. And that's over 30,000 jobs. And so our work at the Economic Development Authority, our work at attracting businesses, small and large, is really paying dividends in the county. And it's at a really important time because, as you indicated, and we too know too well, what's happening in Washington, D.C. is having a toll not only on our families and federal workers, but our federal contractors, small businesses. One of the biggest challenges is the data related to those actions is not complete, and in many times it is very much delayed in real time when we get that information. But when we are looking at unemployment numbers, we're used to in Fairfax County being among the lowest in the country and the lowest in Virginia. And we're now seeing huge increases in unemployment numbers where that isn't always the case. And that's troubling because that's a trend line that points to a larger problem. The other thing that is on my mind often is the people who are being displaced from their jobs or are filing unemployment claims. What is happening with them? And that's what we don't have the real data. Are they applying for and not getting other jobs? Do they have another job in the pipeline? Or frankly, the worst case scenario, are they relocating to another area? And that's where, we just don't have good data. We will over time. But we're kind of at the beginning of a shift that is happening in our workforce. And I feel like due to the work of the EDA, due to the reputation of the county, that we're going to be able to weather this storm as we have weathered storms in the past. But we do think this is more than a thunderstorm event. This is more like a years-long storm that's happening that we're going to have to continue to navigate our way through.
The old saying goes that the best governance is that's closest to the people. And it doesn't get any closer to the people than Board of Supervisors. data delayed, all of these challenges, federal government across the street or across the river that's cutting down jobs and cutting down income, healthcare benefits that are being slashed. Yet you still have to balance that fiscal stability with community needs. How do you do so?
Yeah, it's a great question because I remind, my constituents often that the county like Fairfax now is being hit from every angle, right? So first, our revenues are down because spending is down because people have lost their jobs. The needs of our nonprofit community-based organizations that provide aid to people who have been displaced and affected, their needs are higher than ever. Their fundraising is lower than ever because some of the people that they relied on to support their organizations aren't getting income. And then the county is direct recipient of federal grant money that is also drying up. So we're getting hit at that level. And then finally, the big one, which is if there are shifts in commercial office space and leases that affect our commercial tax base, obviously that is the bread and butter of our county budget, which is based on residential and commercial real estate. And so commercial real estate is going down and we have to balance our budget. Needs are going up. The thing we have to protect against here is rising real estate taxes. And one of the things that I think all of us know is one of the biggest challenges of our region is the lack of available, attainable, affordable housing. And obviously, real estate tax rates play a role in that. And so the county is literally getting hit from every angle. I think the one positive thing that I think a lot of us have to focus on is we entered this storm with very good fundamental balance sheets. We've got a AAA bond rated county organization. The bond rating agencies look to us for model of good governance. We have a predictability, a reliability. We have a highly educated workforce. We have a lot of the institutions like George Mason and others in our community that are huge generators of economic opportunity. We have a great public school system, and we are the safest jurisdiction of our size in the United States of America with rich diversity that is firing on all cylinders. And so I have to try to think of the positive of entering this storm. Our foundational elements and our fundamentals are so strong that even tough budget years like we're going to have this year, next year, as we balance our budget, that the community can rely on the board to make really good balanced decisions that recognize at this point in time we're financially constrained, but we also have to maintain and support those fundamental core services that drive really drive our entire economy here. And so protecting school funding, investing in transportation infrastructure, supporting our first responders, supporting our nonprofits that are providing relief services in our communities. Those are foundational, fundamental things that we're going to protect no matter how difficult the budget is that we're facing.
And there are going to be some tough decisions to be made, which leads to conceptions and misconception about the county. Our students at George Mason, those that are on the main campus in Fairfax, down the street from your offices, mostly live there, work there. We have as well listeners that come from the Arlington campus, and of course our alums and our faculty that are all over the area. What is the biggest misconception about Fairfax economy that you want them to know?
I think there's really two, and they're kind of related. One is that there's this misconception that everyone in Fairfax County is wealthy, and that is completely wrong. We have people who have become extraordinarily successful and are extraordinarily wealthy, and I salute them. And that's the type of incubation we want to have happen here, where we can have people from all over the world come to Fairfax County and become economically successful. I mean, that's wonderful. But I think we need to remember that we also have thousands and thousands of people living in poverty, living paycheck to paycheck, right on the edge. And many of those people are service employees that are necessary to our economy, even on campus. The people who clean the buildings, the people who manage the landscaping, the people who work in the food services. These are really important people in our economy, and we can't forget the needs that they have. And that is significant. When I tell folks when you just look at the number of kids in our public school system on free and reduced price lunches, the number is extraordinary. It's larger than the total size of most other school districts in Virginia. And so, that's one of those indicators that there's a lot of people in the county living below the poverty line. There's a lot of people in the county living paycheck to paycheck, and we have to be cognizant of that. That's a big misconception. The other one is related to that, is that if everyone in Fairfax County is wealthy, why does the county have challenges financially? And the misconception a lot of people have is that local governments tap into income taxes, which we do not do in Virginia. And so no matter how wealthy people in Fairfax County are, our sources of revenue are real estate taxes, commercial taxes, car taxes, and then the things after that are very, very tiny. We do not tax income as local governments, and we do not benefit directly from income tax rolls that, of course, flow to the Commonwealth of Virginia, not to the localities. And so when people tell me the most famous question, or the most routine question I get asked by people is, how can a county as wealthy as Fairfax County have any fiscal issues? And the answer is, of course, because we are largely a funder to the Commonwealth of Virginia through income, and we are left to raise revenue through those sources that I just mentioned. And obviously those can be constrained, and when they are constrained, creates the fiscal challenge that we have at a local government level. So misconceptions are, people here are all wealthy, and because of that, counties must not have any fiscal constraints. And those are absolutely the two most popular misconceptions I hear.
Thank you for clarifying those. For our listeners' benefits, for every dollar that goes to Richmond from Northern Virginia, how much of that dollar comes back to be spent here, Chairman McKay?
It's funny you ask that, because we used to measure this through direct and indirect benefits. And if you look at the totality of the indirect and direct benefits that we get from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the best estimate, and we just updated this just last week, this is going to be coming public next week, so this is a timely question, is that about 50% of all the revenue that we send to Richmond comes back to Fairfax County. If you take out outliers like the number of kids that live in Fairfax County and go to other Virginia public schools that are being helped by the Commonwealth, and you take out some of those other indirect things, we're more down to like 20 cents on the dollar. So depending on how you do the math, it's between 20 and 50 cents on the dollar. And as I tell people, regardless of whether you subscribe to the 20 or the 50, you can at least agree with me that neither one of those are a particularly great return on investment. And so that's underlies that is what creates a lot of our fiscal challenges.
I know the rest of the Commonwealth thank you for those donations. We are recording today on November 21. This episode will not come out for a couple of weeks, so that information would be out there by the time, but it's still timely. You did mention housing, and I am on the governor-elect and lieutenant governor-elect's transition teams, and housing is one of the portfolios I'm working on. I'm going to ask you about it in a minute, but before we go there, let's talk about DOGE cuts for a second. What did you see on the ground as layoffs and agency cuts hits, and again during the shutdown? Any metrics that keep you up at night still?
Absolutely. The biggest metric that keeps me up at night is what we don't know, as we talked about before. But I think when you have as many people as we have in Fairfax County tied directly and indirectly to federal spending, your exposure, of course, is significant. And so we know that Council of Governments has done a monthly dashboard. We know that in August of 2025, the August 2025 data, which is the most recent I have, showed a decrease of 25,000 federal jobs in our region this calendar year. 25,000. Wow. And so we know that a good chunk of those, you could roughly say probably at least a third of those, are directly located in Fairfax County. And so that's huge. We also know that, as I mentioned earlier, our unemployment rate is going up by historical measures really, really significantly. And so that's a concern. The other metric that keeps me up at night, and it's directly related to the DOGE cuts, is our Economic Development Authority has a job site that shows the Northern Virginia number of available jobs in Northern Virginia. And that number last calendar year was well over 100,000 vacant available jobs in Northern Virginia. And here we are, just 11 months into this administration, and largely about 8, 9 months into some of the DOGE cuts that hit. We know that today that number of open available jobs is more like around 40,000. And so what happened to upwards of 80,000 jobs? They didn't get filled by people. They just dropped off the ledger as the private sector, as the federal government stopped posting available jobs. And so that number is going in the wrong direction for the wrong reason. If we were sitting here saying it was going in that direction, you would think it would be a good news story because those jobs are being filled. But it's a bad news story because those jobs no longer exist. And so that keeps me up at night. And that is absolutely a direct reflection of what's happening with the DOGE cuts. And I get more notices in my offices, from businesses that are laying off employees. And I can tell you, many of these businesses are the ones you would expect them to be. They are our contractors, federal government contractors, the Beltway bandits, as we know them, well-known contractors with the federal government that are laying off hundreds of people. And so the DOGE cuts have been real. When people talk about the government shutdown, I always remind them, by Fairfax County standards, the government shutdown has been going on since January. It wasn't just the longest shutdown in government history that the media was focused on, but the government has been shutting down since January when it comes to direct effect on people in Fairfax County who are tied to any level of federal spending. And so this has been the longest shutdown, not just because of the literal shutdown, but because of what started during the DOGE reductions.
And for the benefit of our listeners, I'm not sure how much of this is going to be Fairfax's share, but the estimates for the federal job cuts, the estimate is it's going to cost Virginia overall, big number of it will be Fairfax County, $434 million reduction in our GDP. $434 million reduction in our GDP. That's in addition to $250 million in direct funds that'll be cut because of the healthcare cuts and SNAP cuts. So I feel for you and for the job that you and the board has to do in order to maintain the services that you maintain for your constituents.
And Dave, I do want to add, let me add one thing to what you just said, because I think it's important for people to remember. We know that 42% of the entire Commonwealth of Virginia's GDP is in Northern Virginia alone. And so those cuts that you just mentioned are predominantly in Northern Virginia, and Northern Virginia is almost half of the state's entire GDP. So this problem, while it's one I'm grappling with because I have to balance my budget, is I've reminded people, this is a Virginia problem, not a Northern Virginia problem. And if Northern Virginia is not, firing on all cylinders, the state is not firing on all cylinders. If Northern Virginia has a cold, the state has a flu. And so we can't ignore the fact that this is not just a Northern Virginia problem, but this problem will flow directly to the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the governor-elect and the lieutenant governor-elect are very aware of that, and the entire transition team is working on these issues. Just quickly, before I turn it to my co-host for his questions, what are you doing in the short term to deal with all of the above?
Yeah, so a lot of things. I mean, one, obviously, we're providing the types of support services you would expect through Virginia Career Works, through our EDA, through our Office of Economic Initiatives to provide reemployment opportunities, partner with our universities. We have a great cadre of those from, of course, George Mason University, Northern Virginia Community College, and others to fast-track degree programs. In some cases, provide tuition relief for displaced federal employees. We're doubling down on resources available to our nonprofits so that people who are living paycheck to paycheck don't lose their homes during this really chaotic disruption that's happening in our economy. We are investing with our EDA in emerging technology areas that are big job creators. Today, I was at an event in Chantilly, but we are doubling down on artificial intelligence and helping those companies who are working on that. Cybersecurity, of course, is still a strength of Northern Virginia. So trying to expand those opportunities in aerospace, quantum computing, holding conferences. We had a big conference here on quantum computing a couple months ago. So we're trying to sponsor as many of those events as we can so that people can get re-employment opportunities. I think people don't realize that a lot of these displaced employees have a skill set that is very highly specialized, very important to our nation and to public service, but doesn't always directly align with an available job. And so we're trying to make sure resources are there to reskill and retrain those folks to get them in another job in Northern Virginia as quickly as possible. And so those are some of the things that we're doing at the local level that are really outside of the norm of what you would expect to be happening at a municipal level, but it is that important to us. And this is a leverage moment, with our chambers, with our universities, with our contractors. Let's leverage this moment and make sure we're doing everything we can to reskill, upskill, and make sure that jobs of the future are here. And I think all of us know, if we've learned anything from this lesson, from this exercise and this lesson that we've been through, is that we must diversify our economy. This change and what's affected at the federal level, I don't think is permanent, because I think some of these cuts are going to cost us more money than they'll ever save us, and we'll realize that and bring back some of these jobs. But that being said, we need to make sure we take advantage of this opportunity to expand into those economic areas where we should be in the lead, but haven't always needed, and we need them right now.
We've been there before, Chairman McKay, and unfortunately, when the dollar starts flowing again from the federal government, we all set in our ways and go back to the old habits. Hopefully that won't be the case this time. Yes. Theo, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ramadan. Mr. Chair, from the small business lens, what relief or red tape fixes actually help Main Street when federal demand stalls? Could that be payment cycles, permitting, local vendor preference? What are some of those red tape fixes to mitigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we have local vendor preferences already, small and minority, veteran-owned businesses, and preferences through our procurement system. And I've been talking to our procurement offices. As you know, board members don't get directly involved in procurement, but I've gotten reassurances from them that they also are getting rid of legacy procurement awards and opening up more procurement opportunities, which generate better competition, lower prices for the county, but also allow some of our smaller businesses to get in the game when it comes to supporting municipalities. And so we are most certainly doubling down on that. The other thing is, I've spent a lot of time working on reducing our regulatory impact on businesses. And one thing we did during COVID through our grant program is we got to know a lot of these businesses and what their needs are. And we took advantage of that through surveys and interviews and opportunities to say, hey, what could the county do to help you as a small business? And one of the many things was streamlining our permitting process. And so we're actually just recently had a conversation with a couple AI vendors on how we can better leverage AI to streamline our permitting process. And my goal is to see dramatic improvements in turnaround time in permitting, especially those permits that are not highly technical. It should not take you weeks to get a permit to renovate a commercial kitchen. It should not take you weeks to get an inspection done so that you can open that kitchen. And so I've, really called together our leaders in the county and said, at this moment, we need to do everything we can to provide as much relief as we can to our local businesses. And that being said, Theo, I'm really proud of what we did during COVID, because a lot of local governments use federal spending however they saw fit. We put a ton of money into building relationships, especially with small businesses that were closed or affected by COVID. And as a result of that, you saw when we came out of COVID, a really strong rebound in Fairfax County compared to a lot of other jurisdictions. And so that mindset continues after that pandemic. It's moved right into this chaotic moment that we're in. And we're going to continue to do that. Our Department of Economic Initiatives is providing some coaching for businesses. They have contracts with people who can help people with accounting, marketing expertise, to try to build those bonds with our small businesses. We're not trying to run small businesses. We're trying to help small businesses get the resources and the expertise at low or no cost to help them expand and exist in our ecosystem.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback off that, Mr. Chair, is you've said repeatedly that Fairfax County is a small business county where 90% of the businesses are 50 employees and below. And we are, without question, a small business county. For my next question to you, for student founders at George Mason University, where can they plug into county resources, the EA, incubators, procurement, site selection? What are some of those outlets that they can plug into today?
Well, first, number one outlet is make contact with our Department of Economic Initiatives, because they have been on the front lines of providing so many of the resources that I just mentioned, whether it's coaching or support, helping them map out future economic opportunities that exist in the county, and then also just being able to provide some day-to-day support. And so first reach out would be, Department of Economic Initiatives. The other thing is, and this has nothing to do with the county, but I find it valuable, is link up with your local chambers of commerce, because they also create a network of opportunity for a lot of small businesses that, no government could create. And then in addition to that, take advantage of the things that the county sponsors. We have events all over the county, including ones that provide some direct funding for startup businesses. We have our Fairfax Founders Fund that specifically provides startup capital to minority-owned businesses that might not have the same opportunities with commercial banks. And so we've really gotten deeply outside of the norm of what local governments would do to support our business ecosystem. And our Department of Economic Initiatives manages a lot of that. But just be sure you're in one of those networks, because those networks matter. And especially if you're a small business, they can be the lifeline for a lot of folks, and not only in their time of need, but also could represent exponential business growth opportunities through those connections.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let's talk a little bit about housing. There's a huge growth constraint. We have a housing problem. You alluded earlier about one of the misconceptions that everybody's wealthy in Fairfax County, whether it is a full-time professor or if it's a blue-collar worker that's working for George Mason at the Shar School, they cannot afford a home in Fairfax County. You advanced an aggressive housing motion in the fall. Tell us about the concrete levers and the speed and production. What are you changing in this new initiative to deal with this housing problem, which, by the way, is not just a Fairfax problem, it's a Commonwealth problem.
And really, in a lot of ways, a nationwide problem. But you're right, it's certainly a Commonwealth and a Fairfax problem. And one of the things when I was first elected chair, we moved the target of 5,000 new affordable housing units by 2034 to 10,000. And I'm happy to say, right now we're about halfway there and ahead of schedule if you look at it on the calendar. And so this is a huge initiative of mine, the board matter that I just recently passed. Ask our staff to double down on this stuff. Look at removing regulatory burdens, certainly. Look at getting our Office of Public-Private Partnerships and our Department of Finance more involved in some of these deals with our Department of Housing to expedite their turnaround time. We get a lot of solicitations for affordable housing that are highly technical, highly difficult to review. And the longer that review takes, that's time someone's not in a unit. And so trying to speed up our review of those and the economic documents that go with getting, whether it's Virginia Department of Housing funding or it's federal tax credits or utilizing our own county revolving housing funds. These projects are put together with a lot of stacks of resources, and they're highly, highly technical. So making sure that we have the people in place to handle those and to handle them as effectively and as quickly as possible. The other thing is we have a lot of places of worship in Fairfax County that are underutilized. I talked to a lot of ministers and other folks throughout our community that, hey, we'd like to do affordable housing. We have excess land. We have too many regulations in their way. And so knocking down those barriers, including doing things like saying, if you're a church and you have excess land, instead of you trying to build affordable housing, how about donate that land to the Fairfax County Redevelopment Housing Authority and let them get the housing built and do a ground lease with them where you don't have to worry about the headaches of building housing. You can focus on what you do well. We'll focus on what we do well. And so just some real innovative things like that that leverage the public-private partnerships that are out there, because no government alone can solve this problem. And if you think about the problem, the real problem is just a lack of housing, period. The supply and demand factor that drives the lack of affordable housing is because we're just not producing enough housing, period.
True.
Affordable housing. And so I think as leaders, we have to be bold on that. You'll appreciate this as a former elected official. I mean, most people are all for housing until it gets anywhere near where they live. And then it's like all of a sudden, oh, yeah, well, we were for housing, but not there. And so I think as leaders, we have to be ready, and Chair Randall in Loudoun County and I share this line. I think it was mine first, but we'll settle that in a different venue.
I was not going to mention Loudoun to you today. You brought it up, Mr. Chairman. My home county.
I love Loudoun. I mean, they actually are a great regional partner of ours in Fairfax. And but Chair Randall and I share this thing we share with the community a lot, that we're willing to lose our board seats over a fight for affordable housing. It is that important to our economy. So politicians, elected officials need to embrace housing and not run away from it when it gets hard on a land use case, not run away from density where it is needed near transit stations. And those of us in public office, especially those of us who have teenage kids, college age kids, we know that young people want to live in different environments. They don't want to live in a cul-de-sac in a big house where they have to spend the weekend mowing grass. Our young people want to live in dynamic areas near transit, walkability, where housing is affordable. Well, you can't accomplish that if you're not bold in looking at your comprehensive plan and saying, we're going to maximize the number of housing units we can along major transportation corridors. And I will say, I think the Silver Line, particularly in Tysons and Reston, is a complete demonstration on how you can do that and do it right. And those are the areas we got to make sure we grow a tremendous number of housing units to deal with this issue. And, the challenge I think all of us face is that this is a nationwide problem. It's a Virginia problem. It's a Fairfax problem, but it's also very much a DMV problem. And so one of the things we're making sure is that the Council of Governments and other organizations are monitoring how aggressive are our localities at building affordable housing, because we've got to be all in at this moment. I can't solve the problem alone in Fairfax. We need to solve it regionally at a state level, and to do it well. And this is I also always share with folks that, affordable housing used to always be a thing we talked about in terms of morality. It's a nice thing to do. We can't talk about it in terms of morality. We've got to talk about it in terms of economic development. And I'll leave you with this one last thought on affordable housing, because I like to get out and talk to the government classes in our high schools. And I look at these kids in a classroom, a full classroom of high school students, and they're getting ready to graduate. And I wonder how many of those kids, after they graduate or go to college, are going to be able to afford to live in the community that raised them. And we should all take a moment and think about that, because in our Fairfax County public schools, we invest $16,000 a year per pupil in education. Multiply that by the number of years a kid is in our school system, and then that kid graduates and goes to another state to work. Think about all of the investment that we have lost with that student leaving our region. And most young people will tell you, they left because they couldn't afford to live here. Well, I've got news for you. We can't afford to have them leave. I'm not in the charitable business of educating people in Fairfax County for the benefit of other economies across the United States. I'm in the business of educating kids because it's the right thing to do, but also because it pays economic dividends. But it only works if you can keep them in your economy.
You've nailed so many important, and this is, as I said, I'm handling this issue for transition, and it's very close to my heart. You've hit several of those. For the past 15 years, Mr. Chairman, and when I was in office and then when I traveled around, whether it was for businesses or for housing, when I go, and we used to go around the small business caucus in the House, we used to go around the Commonwealth and hold these sessions and ask what are the one issue that we can help businesses. And then that turned into housing as well. And it was always two answers. It was permitting and zoning. Permitting and zoning, whether it's a small business or whether it's a church trying to build a building. There's a story from a church in our region, we'll keep that neighboring county unnamed, where the church is surrounded by high rises all around them. They're the only non-high rise structure. And when they said they wanted to put a high rise housing on their property, it's been 8 years, they've yet to get the permit. 8 years.
Unacceptable.
And they've yet to, and that's just unacceptable. We're seeing a little bit of a change. It's moving from the not in my backyard, which you hit on. We call it in our slang, language, we call it NIMBYs. And we're seeing a lot of YIMBYs now, right? The movement to yes in my backyard, but that's out of necessity, as you mentioned. We don't want this talent to be moving away. And the definition has changed. Affordable housing used to be a definition for individuals of low income. That's not the case anymore. We're not just talking about low income. We're talking about middle income. We're talking more about attainable housing then. We're not just talking about the low income can't live here. Our teachers can't live here. Our nurses can't live here. Our early career federal contractor employees can't live here, right? Professors, PhDs can't live here. So we're talking about attainable housing. Not just affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And I know that is part and parcel of your plan in Fairfax. How are you going to be able to do that without blowing up your budget?
Well, it actually helps our budget. I mean, honestly, housing production. So one of the interesting things, we did an analysis not long ago because there was this famous finding in most people's minds, historic, that housing costs counties money and commercial businesses raise counties money. And so you shouldn't build too much housing. Well,
another misconception.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is why we have the problem we have now. And I look at our housing, some of the new housing that's being developed, and some of it is being developed to retain higher income, middle income people in Fairfax County. And so one of the more interesting conversations I've had recently was a room full of seniors. And many of them lived in single family detached houses. They're empty nesters. They realize they don't need a house this big anymore, but the housing options are limited for them to stay in our economy. They want to downsize. And so when I think about some things like developments that are happening in Tysons, some age restricted high rise units, market rate, you're talking about big bucks for some of these units. But the important thing is there's seniors who have retired from very lucrative careers in Fairfax County. I got to keep them here, but more importantly, you got to free up their house for another family. And so in that scenario, keeping people here of high income who don't have kids is an economic development multiplier. And so the old ways in the county where you were only building single family homes on cul-de-sacs in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, sure, they were producing a lot of kids. They were smaller houses without high assessments, and sure, people in those units cost the county money. But when you look at today's developments, when you talk about density and you talk about attracting young people and you talk about retaining older workers, we've seen a different change. We've seen that housing conversions actually can save the county money. The one that we did that was most interesting is we analyzed Skyline. And for those folks not familiar with Skyline, high-rise office buildings built, back in the 70s and early 80s, outdated office space, vacant because of, the fact that it's not a great office market anymore. Those buildings were converted using the county's conversion ordinance into residential units. That building is generating way more revenue to the county as a full leased out residential building than it ever did as an office building. And it has enlivened that space. It has supported the local small businesses that relied on people to be in those buildings. And it was an environmentally smart thing to do. You could reuse existing infrastructure. And so this old notion of housing costing counties money is quickly being debunked when you look at the type of housing that we're building. And so that's how you can afford it. And I think that's particularly important right now when you have a lot of people who are rethinking, what is the future for me? Consider a senior level federal worker who lives in the county who just lost their job. And they're thinking to themselves, well, maybe this is a chance to move to a more affordable area or move to an area where there's the type of housing we need. That's a space we've got to fill, because I want to try to keep those people here. And that's why we're aggressively pursuing all different types of housing so that a lot of these empty nesters and a lot of our young people can afford to live in the county. And those are really two target areas for me, our young professionals and our retiring folks in the county. If we can attract and retain more of those, that's a good thing for the county's economy.
Music to my ears. Theo, I'm going to turn the microphone to you again.
Thank you so much. And my next question dovetails, Mr. Chairman, into conversions, but I definitely want to say that at hearing your speech at the groundbreaking of the Residences at Government Center 2, there's already one, there's 2. I remember you said, if folks don't want families in their backyard, you're going to have homeless people in your front yard. And that is very evident and should send a signal to everybody, oh, we need housing now. But to conversions, what is the county doing to convert vacant, underused office retail spaces into these mixed use or residential communities we are seeing today?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, we put in place years ago a policy for conversion of commercial space to residential. We also put in place a policy for conversion of retail space to maker space, quasi-industrial space, because look, the world has changed. And if I can take an underutilized shopping center and put an unconventional tenant in there that can help support all the other small businesses that are there, we've had great success on the retail front doing that. I mean, I can think of examples where we've put a brewery into a shopping center and it really enlivened that whole shopping center, and it needed that. We have a lot of old strip centers that need that. And so it's not just commercial office space, it is conversion of commercial space in general and being more flexible in our zoning ordinance about how to use that. But on the housing front, we know that there's a lot of buildings in the county that likely are never going to be reoccupied like they were before. And those are office buildings. We also know that in a lot of cases, they're very expensive to do a conversion to residential. And so what we have looked at is through our conversion policy, how can we streamline, advance the zoning process? Can we allow some of these conversions to happen by right, taking out the time and cost of going through our regulatory process? And I mentioned the Skyline example. There's several others throughout the county. But what I would say is if people are listening who are thinking about doing a conversion, reach out to us, reach out to the folks at the county on day one so that we can help you get through the process, because we have examples where it's been very successful. And those buildings that are never going to be occupied, the EDA likes to remind folks, and they've told us this in several presentations, and I appreciate this, that the county's office vacancy rate is higher than we like it to be, but it's still a lot lower than a lot of other markets across the country that are comparable in size. But if you took out all those buildings that were built in the 1980s, these old suburban office buildings that are in the middle of nowhere, that are dated, that are not going to be refilled by anyone, if you took those out of the equation and converted all of those or redeveloped all of those, the county's vacancy rate would be in a single digit. And so we've got to reckon with the fact that those buildings are not going to be reoccupied. And so one of the things I've told our staff is let's aggressively reach out to the owners of those buildings and say, hey, come to us with some other ideas. We want to help you solve the problem you have. And we want to do that together through a streamlined process. And so I think there's a great opportunity out there in a lot of places in this county to do more of that. And what people have realized is mixed use communities are where people want to live. And so if you have a suburban office park and you can convert half of that to residential, you now have created daytime, nighttime, weekend traffic in that area that helps a lot of the retail around there. And so those are just some of the things that, we put in place and we want to see more of in the county.
Absolutely. My next question, Mr. Chairman, dovetails into something you mentioned earlier about streamlining permitting in Fairfax County. If you could change one permitting step tomorrow to cut cost and time, what is it? What would that one step be?
Well, it depends on what it is. I would say this, for residential development, it would be to streamline the process builders go through to get VDOT permits. Because while we are at fault at the county, and I chase our staff all the time to do better in turnaround, most of the home builders I talk to tell me their biggest stumbling block is getting through VDOT's process, getting through their bond process, getting through their approval process. And so making sure those applications that need a state level of review, that we are making sure that we are engaged in that and speeding that process up, just like we're doing for our own reviews. And then I think at a micro level, I've told our staff, I won't settle until we're beating every one of our neighboring jurisdictions in time. And when people come to me and say, hey, we got a restaurant permit in Fairfax County in half the time it took us to get ours in the district or Montgomery County, I celebrate those wins, but I go back to our staff always and say, half the time isn't good enough. And so we're always looking at our regional metrics and comparing ourselves. And I am, going to keep pressing our staff to be the number one permit jurisdiction in the DMV in terms of time. And one of the things that is helping us with that was the whole conversion to a lot of e-plans. A lot of people didn't like that. Going to all electronic plans was, daunting for a lot of folks, scary for a lot of folks. But we have seen some measurable improvements in review time because we have a dashboard in the county where our county executives, senior level leadership, agency directors can look at all the site plans and permits pending in the county and see exactly where they are in the process. And we've set up a system where alarm bells go off if they're sitting there longer than they should, to instigate our staff to get those out the door quicker. So we're using a lot of these new technologies to help hold ourselves more accountable and get to my ultimate goal, which is a metric that shows in every permitting analysis that we can do that Fairfax County is getting permits approved faster than anywhere else in the DMV.
Mr. Chairman, we can spend another hour just talking about talent and transportation, so many issues that you're involved in. You talked about regional cooperation as well, which is very important, not just on housing, transportation, and everything else. This morning, I had breakfast at Greater Washington Board of Trade yearly meeting where your county executive, Brian Hill, was with me, along with Chairwoman Randall and Supervisor Angry from Prince William County, Mr. Chairman of VACO this year. Mm-hmm. And I know you all work closely together. Even though you compete, you also work very closely together. So I'm going to skip all of these issues because of time, and I'm going to go to a very quick lightning round, 3 quick questions, and we will end with that. This is for the benefit of our students at George Mason. How do I get appointed to a board or a commission in Fairfax?
Reach out to my office.
All right. Best entry path into county government?
Through a community homeowner association or nonprofit board.
Okay.
And third and final one, top 2 skills Fairfax employers tell you they cannot find.
I think we still lag in healthcare credentials. I talk to a lot of healthcare groups that, healthcare credentials seem to be lacking. And the other thing is, and I don't have an opinion on this one way or another, so I want to condition this answer. But the difficulty they have in getting workers who are willing to come into the office. And that could be a whole nother program because there's pros and cons of remote work. But I hear from a lot of our employers, if we could just get more people to come in more regularly to the office.
If I can only get them to come into class as well.
It's not because of the quality of the instructor. It has to be all other influences.
they sit in bed with their laptops, and they prefer to do that versus showing up physically to class.
Yeah, that's right.
Final thoughts, Chairman McKay.
I want to make sure that all of our listeners are eternal optimists like I am, because, it's easy to get lost in the negativity and the negative data. But, I know this recording is coming out later, but for us real time right now, we're approaching Thanksgiving.
Yes,
And
sir.
I think gratitude and gratefulness, because so many things in our region, so many things at George Mason University work so well. And we focus so much time on the things that aren't working and not enough time on a lot of the things that are working that make this place the best place, I believe, in the country by a mile to live. And I mentioned some of those metrics at the beginning of this broadcast, but let us all focus on the things we can be grateful for. And I know I am grateful to live in a dynamic, forward thinking environment like Northern Virginia that will look at any challenge and not back away from it, but find a way to get through it. And that keeps me focused, laser focused every day on continuing just to make progress.
Amen to that. I have a saying, I say every day is a great day in this great country, even the bad days. And we've had some bad days, but it's still a great day. Chairman McKay, thank you for joining us and for your insights into where Fairfax County is headed. And Theo, thank you for co-hosting, bringing the small business and student perspective to the conversation. For our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about the work happening across Fairfax or connect with the programs we discussed today, you'll find links in the show notes. And as always, you can listen to all of our episodes of Policy and Governance Perspectives at char.gmu.edu/podcast or anywhere you get your podcasts. We are syndicated on all the platforms. I'm Dr. David Ramadan. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned.
That brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Policy and Governance Perspectives. We truly appreciate you joining us for these important discussions featuring voices from across the Schar School. For more information and to explore our archive of past episodes, please visit char.gmu.edu/podcast. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more with you next time.